The summer heat at Oshkosh rises in waves from the tarmac, carrying with it the smell of engine oil and fresh-cut grass. It is 1940 feet, the height of July in Wisconsin, and the air showgrounds stretch endlessly beneath a sky so blue it hurts to look at directly. 76 years old now, Takeshi Yamamoto stands before a restored Heinkel, who 100,
This
his hand
fuselage has
trembling
seen better
slightly
days.
as
The
his
frame is
fingers
solid,
trace
but
the
the skin
aluminum
needs a
skin
lot
of
of
the
work.
wing.
It's a
The metal
survivor.
is warm from the sun, almost alive, and for a moment he is not here at all. He is 29 again. The year is 1938, and the world is about to catch fire. The old man's eyes close. When they open, something has shifted. The crowd around him fades into background noise. The replica aircraft before him becomes something else entirely. A ghost, a memory, a bridge across 47 years of silence. In 1939, I flew the fastest fighter in the world. Germany built it. Japan bought it. America forgot it. Okay? But this machine taught me something neither emperor nor flag could teach. The truth, when it finally came, arrived too late to matter, or perhaps exactly when it needed to. The story does not begin here in the comfortable warmth of an American summer. It begins in the cold autumn of 1938 in a Tokyo office where career officers made decisions that would ripple across oceans and decades. It begins with a young man who believed he understood the world standing at attention before men who believed the same thing. All of them were wrong. But first you need to understand what the Imperial Navy sent me to do in Germany and why they chose me. If you or your father served in the Pacific, stay with me. You will see this war differently by the end. October rain falls on Osaka, turning the streets into mirrors that reflect a gray sky. Takeshi Yamamoto walks those streets without seeing them. His mind already thousands of miles away, already in Germany, already proving something to men who will never fully appreciate the proof. He is the third son of a shipyard foreman at the Kure Naval Arsenal, a man whose hands built destroyers and whose back bent under the weight of empire. Takeshi graduated from Itajima Naval Academy in 1932, not at the top of his class, but close enough to matter, marked always by his instructors as obsessive analytical, too careful with details that other men dismissed. His wife Akiko is 27, the daughter of Admiral Suzuki, a marriage arranged with precision and intended to advance careers on both sides. They have no children yet. The pressure from both families grows heavier with each passing month, but Takeshi tells himself that achievement comes before family, that proving himself worthy comes before proving himself fertile. He tells himself many things in those days. Most of them are lies. What Takeshi believes in October of 1938 is simple and absolute. Japan has invented torpedo technology that will revolutionize naval warfare. Japan has aircraft carriers when other nations are still building battleships. Japan understands the future while the West clings to the past. The Germans, he thinks, overcomplicate everything with their love of engineering precision. The Americans mass produce garbage and call it progress. Only Japan, only the divine empire truly understands the marriage of art and function, tradition, and innovation. He believes this the way other men believe in God. The summons arrives on October 12th. Naval Ministry, Tokyo, 0900 hours, dress uniform. The note is brief, official, empty of warmth or explanation. Takeshi knows immediately that this is either the beginning of everything or the end of his career. There is no middle ground in the Imperial Navy, not for third sons of foremen, not for men who married above their station. The room where they brief him is smaller than he expected. 3 senior officers, none of whom he knows personally, all of whom know his father-in-law. They waste no time on pleasantries. A delegation is being sent to Germany. 3 men. Technical evaluation. The Heinkel He-100 fighter. Reports suggest it may be the fastest aircraft in the world. The Navy has authorized 1.2 million Reichsmarks for purchase, another 1.6 million for manufacturing license. Takeshi will lead the evaluation team. The unstated truth sits in the room like smoke. This is a test. Come back with the aircraft and the knowledge to build it. Prove that Japanese engineering can not only match but surpass what the Germans have accomplished. Return victorious and there will be promotions, respect, vindication for every slight and passed over opportunity. Return with anything less and there will be nothing but shame. That night, Admiral Suzuki visits their modest home in Osaka. He drinks sake in small, precise sips and does not look at his daughter while he speaks to his son-in-law. The conversation is brief. "Come back with the plane," the admiral says, or "do not come back at all." Takeshi understands. He has always understood. This is what it means to marry into a family of consequence. This is what it means to be a third son, reaching for heights his birth did not promise him. The Trans-Siberian Railway cuts across a continent like a scar across skin's 7,000 miles of track, from Vladivostok to Moscow, Moscow to Berlin. Takeshi boards the train on October 15th with two junior engineers whose names he will forget before the journey ends. They are competent men, quiet men, men who will take notes and make measurements and never once question his authority. This is how he prefers it. For 13 days, the world outside the window transforms from Japanese autumn to Russian winter to German rain. Takeshi uses the time to study. He has brought with him every German engineering journal he could acquire, every technical specification, every photograph of Heinkel aircraft. He makes notes in the margins, circling what he perceives as flaws, underlining weaknesses, preparing the superiority speech he will deliver when they ask for his assessment. The train stops in Moscow on October 23rd. An hour layover. Takeshi steps onto the platform to stretch his legs and smoke a cigarette, and that is when he sees them. German BMW aircraft engines still in their shipping crates, stacked on a freight platform, waiting for transport east. The Cyrillic markings on the manifest are beyond his comprehension, but the BMW logo is universal. A Russian engineer, perhaps 50 years old and smelling of tobacco and diesel fuel, stands beside him. The man speaks broken English, the only language they might share. He gestures at the crates and says something Takeshi does not expect. German's honest. Japanese proud. Honesty wins. Then the man walks away, disappearing into the Moscow crowd, and Takeshi is left standing with his cigarette burning down between his fingers, wondering what that was supposed to mean. He dismisses it. Russian philosophy means nothing. Germans are not honest, they are precise. Japanese are not merely proud, they are superior. These are facts, not feelings. But something about those words follows him onto the train, follows him across Poland and into Germany, follows him like a shadow that grows longer as the sun begins to set. Berlin appears through fog on October 28th. The station is enormous vaulted ceilings and iron girders and the smell of coal smoke mixing with something else, something Takeshi cannot immediately identify. Coffee. German coffee. The scent is everywhere, bitter and strong and somehow aggressive in its intensity. A porter offers him a cup while they wait for their luggage, and Takeshi accepts out of politeness, expecting something refined, something measured. The first sip hits his tongue like a slap. Bitter, overwhelming, nothing like the careful precision of Japanese green tea, none of the ritual, none of the respect for subtlety. This is coffee that announces itself, demands attention, refuses to be ignored. Takeshi drinks half the cup because pride will not allow him to waste it, and the entire time he is thinking that this is what is wrong with the West. Everything excessive, everything wasteful, everything too much. He does not know it yet, but this coffee will return to him later. This moment will matter in ways he cannot begin to comprehend. The drive from Berlin to Marienhead takes 4 hours through countryside that looks nothing like Japan. Everything is flat where Japan is mountainous gray, where Japan is green cold, where Japan remembers warmth. The Heinkel facility appears through drizzle like a fortress. Long buildings of concrete and glass smokestacks rising against autumn sky, the whole complex humming with industry and urgency. Takeshi expected arrogance. He expected Nazi efficiency and superior attitudes and engineers who would treat him like a subordinate. He expected swastikas and propaganda and men who believed themselves the master race. What he finds instead breaks his expectations so completely that he will spend the next 3 weeks trying to rebuild them. Ernst Heinkel is not what Takeshi imagined. The man is in his 50s, exhausted in the way that only prolonged disappointment can exhaust a person. He chain smokes throughout their first meeting, his fingers yellowed with nicotine, his eyes carrying the weight of failures that success has not yet balanced. When Takeshi and his delegation enter the conference room, Heinkel stands, shakes hands with genuine warmth, and speaks words that land like stones in still water. "Thank you for coming. We need this sale." Need, not want, need. The vulnerability in that single word is startling. Takeshi has prepared for German superiority for technical one-upmanship, for the subtle warfare of engineers proving dominance through specification and performance. He is not prepared for this. For honesty that sounds like desperation. For admission of weakness from men who are supposed to be strong. They walk to the hangar through rain that has become more insistent. Inside, beneath fluorescent lights that buzz and flicker, the He-100V5 sits like a sculpture, like something that transcended mere function to become art. Takeshi has seen photographs, has studied specifications, has convinced himself that reality could not match the propaganda. He was wrong. The aircraft is beautiful in a way that makes his throat tighten. Smooth lines, no visible radiators. Everything flowing into everything else like water frozen mid-pour. The wing is clean, the fuselage perfect, the whole machine suggesting speed even while motionless. For 30 seconds, Takeshi forgets every prepared criticism. For 30 seconds, he is simply an engineer looking at the work of other engineers and recognizing excellence. Then he catches himself. Remembers why he is here. Remembers what is expected. His voice when it comes is harder than necessary, but can it fight? The question hangs in the air. Ernst Heinkel and chief designer Siegfried Gunther exchange a glance, and in that glance is something Takeshi will not understand for years. They are not offended, they are not defensive, they are simply tired. Siegfried Gunther is 42 quiet, where Heinkel is expansive, meticulous, where Heinkel is passionate. He carries a leather portfolio filled with documents, and now he opens it, withdrawing complete engineering blueprints, spreading them across a work table with care bordering on reverence. Takeshi expects sanitized versions carefully edited to hide proprietary secrets. Instead, Gunther lays out everything. Page 47. Gunther says his finger tapping a specific calculation. That is where we failed. Can you see it? Takeshi leans forward, examining the mathematics. The stress calculations for the wing skin, under temperature, differential loading. And yes, there it is. An error. Not catastrophic, but significant. The kind of mistake that leads to warping, to structural damage, to crashed aircraft and dead pilots. The kind of mistake that any competent engineer should hide from potential buyers. Why show me your failure? The question comes out before Takeshi can stop it. Genuine confusion overriding diplomatic caution. Gunther looks at him with eyes that have not slept properly in weeks. Because if you buy a broken plane, we both lose. We fixed this after the V1 crashed. The V5 you see now incorporates those corrections. You deserve to know the truth of what you are purchasing, the truth, that word again. Takeshi feels something shifting inside him, tectonic plates of certainty beginning to move in ways he cannot control. This is not how enemies behave. This is not how competitors operate. This is not what he expected from Axis partners, from German engineers, from men who should be hiding flaws and maximizing profit. This is something else entirely, something he has no framework to understand. That afternoon, October 30th, 1938, Heinkel's manager pulls Takeshi aside before the hangar tour. There is a situation the manager explains in careful German that Takeshi's interpreter translates into careful Japanese. A Soviet delegation is also visiting today. Different routes have been arranged. The Japanese team will tour the East Hangar at 9. The Soviets will see the West Hangar at the same time. Takeshi's test flight is scheduled for 11. The Soviet test flight for 2. Separate lunches, separate facilities, separate exits. The elaborate choreography would be funny if it were not so revealing. Takeshi realizes with sudden clarity that they are all buying the same aircraft, Japan, Soviet Union, perhaps others. Everyone seeking the same speed, the same advantage, the same edge that might tip the balance when the shooting starts. And if this plane is truly superior, why would Heinkel sell it to nations who might soon be enemies of each other? The first stirring of real doubt takes root. Not doubt in German engineering. Doubt in something larger, something harder to name. At noon, walking between hangars, Takeshi sees him through a window. The Soviet pilot. Younger than Takeshi, maybe 25, wearing a uniform, Takeshi recognizes from intelligence briefings. The man is standing in front of an He-100 exactly as Takeshi had stood that morning, and the expression on his face is a mirror. Same awe, same doubt, same confusion. Their eyes meet across 50 meters of German concrete. The Soviet nods. Takeshi nods back. Neither smiles. There is nothing to smile about. They are both here for the same reason, both trying to bring home the same trophy, both serving empires that will soon devour millions. But in that moment, that brief acknowledgement, Takeshi sees himself reflected in a man he is supposed to consider an ideological enemy. That nod will haunt him. The test flight is scheduled for 11. Hans Dieterle, the chief test pilot, meets Takeshi on the tarmac at 10:45. Dieterle is 31, a Luftwaffe veteran with 2 fingers missing from his left hand, a casualty of a crash that should have killed him, but merely scarred him. He is not the perfect Aryan Superman of propaganda posters. He is short, stocky, practical, and when he speaks, his words carry the casual authority of someone who has faced death and found it less impressive than advertised. "Do not fight the rudder," Dieterle says as they walk toward the aircraft. "She wants to fly straight. Let her." The cockpit smells of leather and oil and metal, all of it warmed by morning sun. Takeshi settles into the seat, running through pre-flight checks with the precision of 10,000 hours of training. The instrument panel is laid out differently than Japanese aircraft, German logic versus Japanese efficiency, but the fundamentals are universal. Airspeed, altitude, fuel, temperature. The vocabulary of flight transcends borders. Engine start. The Daimler-Benz DB601 does not roar to life so much as purr, a sound completely unlike the rough radial engines Takeshi has flown his entire career. This is smooth, refined, controlled power. The whole aircraft seems to hum with readiness. Takeoff roll. Acceleration that presses him back into the seat, the runway blurring the moment of rotation, arriving faster than expected. Then the wheels leave Earth and Takeshi is flying. Climb rate startles him. The HE-100 rises like something desperate to escape gravity, the altimeter unwinding faster than any aircraft he has ever piloted. His stomach drops before his mind fully registers the rate of ascent. At 16,400 feet, he levels off and checks airspeed, 413 miles per hour. The number seems impossible. His previous aircraft maxed out at 320. This is not an incremental improvement. This is a revolution. But it is not the speed that transforms him. It is the smoothness. No vibration, no rattling panels, no sense of barely controlled chaos. This is flight as it should be, elegant and pure and somehow right in a way that makes everything he has flown before that feel like rough approximation. The wind noise disappears behind the perfectly fitted canopy, leaving only the song of the engine, that smooth DB601 purr that sounds like confidence made audible. Takeshi keys the radio. "What is the secret of this smoothness?" Dieterle's voice comes back through static. "No secret, Herr Yamamoto. Just care. Every rivet placed by hand. Every panel fitted with precision. We do not rush. We do not cut corners. We simply try to do it correctly." Something in Takeshi's chest tightens. This is not the answer he wanted. He wanted specifications. He wanted measurements. He wanted something he could quantify and replicate and ultimately improve upon. Care is not an answer. Care is a philosophy. And philosophies cannot be stolen, cannot be copied, cannot be mass-produced by nations desperate for advantage. The landing approach is textbook. Gear down, flaps extended airspeed, reducing the runway, rising to meet him. But as the wheels touch concrete, Dieterle's voice comes through the headset one more time. "Notice the emergency gear extension. Pull the red handle. Gravity drop. No hydraulics. No electrical. Just weight and springs. We lost the V3 to stuck landing gear. The pilot died. So we learned. We designed the backup system. You learn from failure, yes." Takeshi taxes to a stop, kills the engine, sits in sudden silence. The question echoes. You learn from failure. Not a rhetorical question. A genuine inquiry. As if learning from failure is not shameful, but inevitable. As if admission of mistakes is not weakness, but wisdom. This is not how the Imperial Navy operates. This is not how Japan approaches engineering. Failure is not discussed. Mistakes are not acknowledged. Weakness is never admitted, especially not to foreign observers, especially not to potential customers. Takeshi climbs from the cockpit feeling more confused than when he entered it. The flight was perfect. The aircraft exceeded every specification, but the Germans' willingness to discuss failure, to point out their own mistakes, to hand over complete blueprints, showing exactly where calculations went wrong. None of this makes sense within his understanding of how great powers behave. The debriefing takes place in a small conference room that smells of coffee and cigarettes. Siegfried Gunther is waiting with more documents, more honesty, more things that Takeshi did not ask for and does not know how to process. Gunther slides a folder across the table. Updated calculations. Gunther says, "We fixed the wing warping problem after you booked passage to Germany. You are seeing the V5, not the broken one. This is honest progress. We do not hide our evolution from failure to function." Takeshi opens the folder. Inside are revised stress calculations, updated metallurgy reports, photographs of the failed V1 wing showing warped skin and damaged structure. Then photographs of the V5 wing pristine and perfect. The progression from failure to success documented with surgical precision. That night alone in his hotel room in Rostock, Takeshi writes a letter to his wife Akiko. He writes about the aircraft, about the flight, about the speed and smoothness. Then he writes something else, something that surprises him even as his pen forms the characters. "I came here to judge engineering. I am discovering something about truth. I do not yet know what I mean. Perhaps I never will, but something is different here, something I was not expecting to find." He reads the letter 3 times. Then he tears it into small pieces and drops them in the waste bin. Some truths are too dangerous to send home. Some discoveries are too uncertain to share. Akiko would not understand. Admiral Suzuki would consider it weakness. The Naval Ministry would see it as failure of focus. So instead, Takeshi writes a different letter full of technical specifications and performance data and reassurances that the He-100 will serve the Empire well. He writes what is expected. He hides what is true. It will be 47 years before he understands that this moment, this choice to conceal rather than confess, was the real failure. Not the Germans' honest admission of flawed calculations, not their willingness to show weakness, his refusal to acknowledge his own confusion, his choice of certainty over truth. But that understanding is still decades away. Tonight in October of 1938, Takeshi Yamamoto is simply a young officer who flew the fastest fighter in the world and discovered that speed alone does not answer every question. Tonight he is beginning to suspect that the Germans are teaching him something his education never prepared him to learn. Tonight he is starting to doubt. And doubt, once it takes root, grows like bamboo, silent, persistent, impossible to ignore. The old man opens his eyes. Oshkosh, 1985. The summer sun is lower now, the air cooling the crowd around the He-100, a replica, beginning to thin. His hand is still resting on the wing, still feeling the warmth of metal that was never meant to carry the weight of memory this heavy. Someone asks if he ever flew one during the war. Takeshi smiles, the expression carrying 47 years of what cannot be said in simple sentences. "I flew the prototype," he answers, "in Germany. Before it all started, before we knew how it would end." What he does not say is that the prototype taught him more about empires and pride and the price of certainty than any aircraft should be capable of teaching. What he does not say is that the lessons took half a lifetime to understand, and by the time he understood them, the world had already moved on. But the story is not over. It is only beginning. November arrives in northern Germany like a door closing. The days shorten, the rain turns colder, and the wind off the Baltic carries the smell of salt and coming winter. Takeshi has been at the Heinkel facility for 2 weeks now, and the confusion he felt that first day has not diminished. If anything, it has grown, spreading through his certainty like cracks through ice. Every morning begins the same way. Coffee in the engineer's canteen at 7. Takeshi has stopped trying to drink it the way the Germans do, black and bitter and strong enough to strip paint. Instead, he adds milk and sugar, transforming it into something almost palatable, and pretends not to notice the small smiles this earns from Siegfried Gunther and the other designers. They do not mock him for this concession. They simply note it the way engineers note everything, filing it away as data about the world and how different men move through it differently. The technical sessions consume entire days. Gunther spreads blueprints across tables that seem to multiply overnight, each drawing revealing another layer of the He-100's complexity. The evaporative cooling system, the stressed skin wing, the explosive rivets that allow assembly in half the time of traditional construction. Every innovation comes with its own story of failure, iteration, correction. Gunter talks about mistakes the way other men talk about victories without shame, with only the calm recitation of facts and consequences. On November 8th, during a session focused on engine mounting, Takeshi asks a question that has been troubling him since the first flight. Why eliminate the standard engine mount entirely? Why use the cowling itself as structural support? The weight saving is minimal. The risk seems disproportionate. Gunter looks up from the drawings, his pencil still in hand, and for a long moment says nothing. Then he gestures for Takeshi to follow him. They walk through the factory floor, past workers assembling fuselages, past the smell of welding and cutting oil to a storage area at the building's far end. They're covered with a tarp as the wreckage of the WWII. Gunter pulls back the covering. The damaged wing lies like a corpse on sawhorses, its skin warped and buckled from the temperature differentials that Takeshi saw documented in those first blueprints. But Gunter is not pointing at the wing. He is pointing at the engine mount, at the twisted metal where standard attachment points failed during the emergency landing after the cooling system's catastrophic malfunction. If we had used traditional mounting, Gunter says quietly, the engine would have torn free, would have gone through the cockpit. Hans Dieterle would be dead, not merely injured. So we eliminated the traditional mount, made the cowling strong enough to hold the engine, reduced failure points, increased pilot survival. This is engineering, Herr Yamamoto. We do not design for the perfect flight. We design for the crash. Takeshi stands before the wreckage and feels something shift in his understanding. Japanese engineering philosophy prizes elegance, efficiency, the pursuit of perfection. But perfection assumes conditions that rarely exist in reality. The Germans are not designing for ideal circumstances. They are designing for chaos, for failure, for the moment when everything goes wrong and the only thing that matters is whether the pilot walks away. It is pragmatism versus artistry, survival versus beauty. And standing there in the dim light of the storage room, Takeshi is no longer certain which philosophy is superior. That afternoon, the factory foreman invites Takeshi to observe the assembly process on the production floor. Not the V-series prototypes, which are hand-built by master craftsmen, but the D-series aircraft that Heinkel hopes to sell to Japan and other foreign buyers. Takeshi expects to see something impressive, German precision and efficiency creating aircraft with mechanical regularity. What he sees instead is chaos barely contained. Workers arguing over rivet placement. A fuselage section returned from quality control 3 times for the same defect. A young assembler reduced to tears over a misaligned panel that will require hours to correct. The foreman watches all of this without apparent concern, occasionally offering quiet suggestions, never raising his voice, and allowing the problems to exist until the workers solve them. Why do you tolerate such disorder? Takeshi cannot help asking. In Japan, there would be discipline, structure. The foreman would enforce standards. The foreman, a man in his 60s named Wilhelm, who fought in the previous war and carries shrapnel in his left leg, considers the question with the seriousness it perhaps does not deserve. Discipline creates obedience, he says finally, but obedience does not create understanding. These workers must know why the rivet goes in this position and not that one, must understand the consequence of poor alignment. If I simply demand compliance, they build what I tell them to build. But when I am not watching, when they face a problem I did not anticipate, they will not know how to solve it. So I let them struggle, let them fail, let them learn. Learning again. That word that keeps appearing in German sentences like a refrain. The acceptance of failure as teacher rather than shame. Takeshi thinks about Itajima Naval Academy, about instructors who punished mistakes with physical correction, about a system designed to create warriors who did not question, and engineers who followed specification without deviation. And he wonders not for the first time what is lost in such efficiency. The breakthrough, when it comes, is not technical. It arrives on November 12th in the middle of an afternoon session about fuel tank placement, and it comes wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Siegfried Gunter's wife visits the factory that day, bringing lunch for her husband, as she apparently does twice weekly. She is a small woman, perhaps 40, with kind eyes and flower on her sleeve. She greets Takeshi with warmth that seems genuine, apologizes for interrupting in careful broken English, and leaves the package on Gunter's desk before departing. The scent that escapes when Gunter unwraps it fills the small office with something that makes Takeshi's stomach clench with sudden, unexpected homesickness. Chocolate. But not the German chocolate Takeshi has tasted in hotel restaurants, dark and bitter and sophisticated. This is something else. Lighter. Sweeter. Gunter breaks off a piece and offers it to Takeshi with a small, almost embarrassed smile. American Gunter says, "My wife's cousin sends it from New York. Hershey's. You have tried this?" Takeshi shakes his head and accepts the piece. The chocolate is unlike anything in his experience. Not refined, not subtle, almost aggressively sweet, but there is something about it, some quality of straightforward pleasure without pretension that catches him off guard. He chews slowly and Gunter watches with an expression that suggests this is a test, though what is being tested remains unclear. My wife's cousin Gunter continues works in engineering in America. For Boeing, he sends letters sometimes about their methods. Very different from ours. Less precision, more, how do you say, pragmatic improvisation. They build what works, not what is theoretically perfect. And they send chocolate, which is also not perfect, but it makes people happy. This is important too, I think. Making people happy. The chocolate sits on Takeshi's tongue melting, and he thinks about the coffee he has been drinking every morning, the grudging accommodation he has made to German habits. And now this American chocolate arriving in a German engineering office, sent by a cousin who builds American bombers that might one day face German fighters in combat. The whole situation is absurd. And yet here they are, two engineers from nations preparing for war, sharing chocolate from a third nation that will probably join that war on one side or another, and finding in this simple sweetness a moment of connection that transcends the politics neither of them fully controls. Do you think Takeshi asked carefully that Americans understand engineering the way Germans do? Or Japanese Gunter considers this while breaking off another piece of chocolate for himself? I think Americans understand something different. They understand that perfect is the enemy of good enough. That a weapon delivered today is worth more than a superior weapon delivered next year. They will build 100 adequate aircraft while we perfect 10 superior ones. And in war, numbers often matter more than quality. This is what my cousin writes. This is what worries me. The honesty is startling again. A German engineer admitting that American mass production might defeat German precision. Takeshi wants to argue, wants to defend the Japanese philosophy that aligns more closely with German perfectionism than American pragmatism. But the chocolate in his mouth makes argument seem petty. Chocolate sent from one potential enemy to another, shared with a third. The whole world is preparing for war, and here in this small office, three nations' engineering philosophies meet in a candy bar. That night, Takeshi writes another letter he will not send. This one tries to explain the chocolate, the connection between American simplicity and German complexity and Japanese refinement. He wants to tell Akiko that the world is more complicated than their education prepared them to understand. That enemies share chocolate. That honesty might be worth more than superiority. That he is learning things the Imperial Navy never intended him to learn. But the words will not come correctly. Every sentence sounds naive or treasonous or simply confused. So again, he tears the letter into pieces and writes the expected report instead. Technical specifications, performance data, recommendations for purchase. All facts, no truth. The propaganda game reveals itself slowly then all at once. On November 15th, a photographer arrives from Berlin, official looking with official papers, and spends 2 days taking pictures of the HE-100 WWII from every conceivable angle. The aircraft is repainted during this time, its original markings covered with a designation that Takeshi does not recognize. He-112U. When he asks Gunter about this, the chief designer's face goes carefully neutral. Marketing Gunter says, and will say nothing more. But Takeshi pieces it together from overheard conversations, from the knowing looks exchanged between engineers, from the fact that Ernst Heinkel himself is absent during the photographer's visit. The He-100 is being disguised as the He-112, the earlier Heinkel fighter that lost the Luftwaffe contract to Messerschmitt's Bf-109. The world record that Ernst Udet set in the He-105-2 back in June will be attributed to this fictional He-112U. The deception is elaborate and apparently sanctioned at the highest levels of the German aviation ministry. The why becomes clear when Takeshi realizes what this means. Germany wants potential buyers, Japan included, to believe the HE-100 is already in Luftwaffe service, that the speed records are being set by operational military aircraft, not experimental prototypes, that purchasing this fighter means buying proven technology, not taking a risk on unproven design. It is a lie, an elaborate, carefully constructed government-approved lie. And Takeshi is complicit in it simply by being here, by evaluating an aircraft under false pretenses, by preparing to recommend purchase to the Imperial Navy based on performance claims that are accurate but attributed to the wrong aircraft. On November 18th, Takeshi confronts Heinkel about this. Not aggressively. Japanese protocol and his position as a guest forbid aggression, but he asks the question directly during a private meeting in Heinkel's office. Why the deception? Why not simply sell the He-100 as what it is? Heinkel lights another cigarette, his fingers yellow and trembling slightly, and the look he gives Takeshi carries exhaustion that has moved beyond physical into something closer to spiritual. Because the Luftwaffe rejected this aircraft, he says. Because Messerschmitt won the production contract. Because my company survives on bomber production and foreign sales. Because truth is a luxury I cannot afford. Then why show me the truth? Why not maintain the fiction? You could have hidden the V1 wreckage, could have presented only success. Why admit failure? Heinkel draws on his cigarette, exhales slowly, and when he speaks, his voice carries something that sounds like regret for crimes not yet committed. Because you are an engineer, Herr Yamamoto. Engineers deserve truth. Politicians deserve propaganda. I am trying to sell you an aircraft, yes, but I am also trying to preserve something. Some piece of honesty in a world that values lies. Perhaps that is foolish. Perhaps I should simply take your money and say nothing about warped wings and failed calculations. But I am old enough to remember when engineering meant something beyond profit and politics. So I show you both, the truth and the lie, and I let you decide which matters more. The answer sits in the room between them like smoke. Takeshi knows which should matter more, knows what his duty demands. The mission is clear. Evaluate the aircraft. Recommend purchase if performance warrants. Bring home technical knowledge that will serve the empire. None of this requires wrestling with questions about truth and propaganda and the difference between what is real and what is claimed. But the answer Heinkel has given him, this weary admission that truth is luxury, feels more honest than anything Takeshi has encountered in his entire naval career. And that honesty makes everything more complicated. Word reaches them on November 20th that preparations are underway for another record attempt. Not Heinkel this time. Messerschmitt. The Bf-209A purpose-built racing aircraft disguised as a fighter will challenge the speed record that Udet set in the HE-100 VOF-2. The attempt is scheduled for April 1939. The target is 470 miles per hour. Takeshi watches the German engineers' reaction to this news and sees something he recognizes, the quiet determination, the sudden long hours. The way conversations shift from theoretical to practical overnight. Competition drives innovation. The Japanese understand this, but watching it happen in Germany, seeing engineers from competing companies pushing each other toward excellence, even as their nation prepares for war, reveals something about the universality of engineering culture that national boundaries cannot contain. Gunther begins working on calculations for another He-100 variant, the V8, designed specifically to reclaim the record from Messerschmitt. He does this work after hours, technically on his own time, driven by something that has nothing to do with profit or politics, and everything to do with pride and craft. Takeshi stays late one evening to observe, and Gunther, without looking up from his slide rule, begins talking. When I was young, I wanted to design passenger aircraft, beautiful machines that would make travel comfortable and safe, bring people together across distances. But there is no money in peace, Herr Yamamoto, no glory in commercial aviation. So I designed fighters, design machines meant to kill other pilots, other engineers' creations. And I tell myself that speed and innovation justify this, that pushing boundaries matters regardless of purpose. But some nights I wonder what I could have built if the world wanted bridges instead of bullets. Takeshi has no answer for this. In Japan, such thoughts would be weakness, doubt in the empire's purpose, failure to embrace the warrior spirit. But sitting in the quiet office with November darkness pressing against the windows and the smell of coffee gone cold in their cups, weakness feels more honest than the alternative. Do you think Takeshi asked that engineers bear responsibility for how their designs are used? Gunter looks up. Finally, his eyes red from hours of calculation, and the smile he offers carries no humor whatsoever. If we do not, then we are simply technicians. Skilled laborers building what we are told to build. But if we do bear responsibility, then we are all guilty. Every aircraft that drops bombs, every gun that kills, every innovation that makes warfare more efficient, we are all complicit. So we tell ourselves comfortable lies. That speed matters. That innovation justifies itself. That we are simply engineers, not architects of death. The chocolate wrapper is still on the desk, brown paper crumpled, where Gunter set it aside hours ago. American chocolate consumed by German engineers while designing fighters to face American bombers. The absurdity and tragedy of it all feels suddenly overwhelming. Takeshi returns to his hotel that night and does not attempt to write any letters. Some truths are too heavy for paper to bear. The purchase decision comes due on November 28th. 3 aircraft, the He-100D0 series, 1.2 million Reichsmarks. The paperwork is prepared, the money authorized, the shipping arrangements pending only Takeshi's final approval and signature. He has all the technical data required to make an informed recommendation. The aircraft performs as specified. The design is sound. The Germans have been honest about flaws and diligent about corrections. By every rational measure, this purchase serves the Imperial Navy's interests. Takeshi signs the documents with a hand that does not shake but perhaps should. The transaction is complete. Japan owns 3 of the fastest fighters ever built. Heinkel's company survives another quarter. Gunter's designs will be studied and potentially replicated. Everyone has gained what they sought. But that night alone in his hotel room, Takeshi cannot escape the feeling that he has participated in something larger and darker than a simple aircraft purchase. That these machines born from German desperation and Japanese ambition and American chocolate somehow will not end well for anyone. That speed and innovation and engineering excellence cannot outrun the future that all of them see coming, but none of them know how to prevent. He thinks about Gunter's question, whether engineers bear responsibility. And he thinks about his own answer, the one he did not voice. That responsibility without power to refuse is not responsibility at all. That they are all building the world they do not want because the world they do want does not pay. December arrives with snow. Takeshi prepares to return to Japan, his mission accomplished, his career secured. The He-100 aircraft will follow by ship months behind him, arriving at Kasumagara Air Base in spring 1940. He will never fly them. We'll never see them assembled. We'll never know if the Japanese Navy's plans to mass-produce them at Hitachi facilities will come to fruition. On his final day at the Heinkel facility, Gunter gives him a gift, a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside is an American Hershey's bar and a handwritten note. For when you need to remember that some sweetness survives even in bitter times. Takeshi thanks him with a B that feels inadequate. He wants to say something profound about their weeks together, about what he has learned about the strange friendship that has formed between them, despite language and culture and the approaching darkness. But the words feel too large for the moment. Instead, he simply says, "Thank you for the honesty, for the chocolate, for treating him as an engineer rather than an enemy." Gunter smiles, and it is the first time Takeshi has seen the expression reach his eyes. "Engineers are never enemies," he says, "only the things we are forced to build." The train carries Takeshi east again, back across the continent, back toward Japan and duty, in a future that feels more uncertain than when he left. The chocolate sits in his bag, carefully wrapped, preserved against the cold. He does not eat it, cannot bring himself to consume this small piece of connection, this evidence that sweetness exists, this gift from a friend who might soon be an enemy, in fact, rather than merely in political designation. 47 years later, standing before the He-100 replica in Wisconsin, summer heat, Takeshi will remember that chocolate, will remember Gunter's tired smile, will remember the moment he understood that engineering, like all human endeavors, cannot escape the moral weight of creation. But that understanding, like so much else, came too late to change anything. The aircraft were built, the wars were fought, the deaths were counted, and all the honesty and chocolate and friendship between engineers could not stop what nations had already decided must happen. The old man's hand leaves the wing, finally the metal cooling as the sun drops toward the horizon. Someone asks what became of the German engineers he worked with. Takeshi's answer is brief. Some survived, some did not. All of them carried the weight of what they built. He does not mention that Siegfried Gunther lived into the 1970s, that they exchanged letters occasionally after the war, brief notes about engineering and memory, and the strange paths life takes. He does not mention that the American chocolate became a private symbol between them referenced, but never explained a shared secret about sweetness in bitter times. Some stories are not meant to be told completely. Some truths exist only between the people who live them, and some lessons take half a century to understand, arriving long after the moment when understanding might have mattered. The crowd thins further. The day is ending, and Takeshi Yamamoto, 76 years old, stands in America before a German aircraft that Japan bought and never used, carrying memories too complex to share and too important to forget. But the story is not finished. Not yet. Because the real education, the one that would change everything he thought he understood about honor and duty and what it means to serve something larger than yourself, has not even begun. That education would not arrive in Germany. It would come later, much later, in a place he never expected to find it, in Texas. Of all the unlikely places, in Texas. The Pacific crossing takes 3 weeks in January 1940, the ship rolling through winter swells that make even experienced sailors green. Takeshi stands at the rail as Japan appears through morning mist, Mount Fuji rising white against pale sky, and feels nothing like the triumph he expected. The mission succeeded. The aircraft are in the hold below, carefully crated bound for Kasumigara. His career is secure. Admiral Suzuki's approval is assured. Everything went according to plan. But something has broken inside him that success cannot repair. Some piece of certainty that Germany took from him and replaced with questions he does not know how to answer. Questions about truth and lies. About what engineers owe to the world beyond technical specifications. About whether chocolate from America eaten in Germany by a Japanese officer means something or means nothing at all. The homecoming is everything protocol demands. Formal report to Naval Ministry. Technical briefings that consume days. Akiko greeting him with appropriate restraint, asking appropriate questions, accepting his appropriate answers. Admiral Suzuki's nod of approval, brief and final sealing, Takeshi's promotion to commander. The machinery of empire functions as designed, efficient, and implacable, and Takeshi moves through it like a man underwater, hearing everything muffled, seeing everything through distortion. The Hu-100 aircraft arrive at Kasumigara Air Base in May. Takeshi is assigned to oversee their assembly and evaluation, a posting that should feel like vindication, but instead feels like prolonging something already finished. The crates are opened with ceremonial care. The parts emerge pristine, exactly as specified, German precision translated into Japanese possession. And then nothing happens. Hitachi Company has prepared the facility in Chiba for mass production. Engineers stand ready to begin replication. The Navy has budgeted for hundreds of aircraft, an entire air defense fleet built on German speed and Japanese determination. Everything is in place. But weeks pass, then months, and the order to begin production never arrives. Takeshi learns the truth in fragments, whispered in hallways, admitted reluctantly in closed meetings. The Daimler-Benz DB601 engine is unavailable. Germany needs every unit for their own BF109 and BF110 production. Substituting the Nakajima HA41 would require complete redesign. The evaporative cooling system, that brilliant innovative solution to drag reduction, proves impossible to replicate with available materials. The technical challenges multiply faster than solutions emerge. But the real reason, unspoken but understood, is simpler and more damning. The Navy has committed to the Mitsubishi A6M0. Resources are finite. Producing 2 different fighters serves no strategic purpose. The HE-100, for all its speed and German engineering excellence, is redundant before it ever reaches combat. The 3 aircraft sit in a hangar at Kasumigara Museum pieces before their time testaments to a purchase that made perfect sense in November 1938 and no sense at all by summer 1940. Takeshi visits them, sometimes running his hand along the smooth wing skin, remembering Siegfried Gunther's tired smile. and the chocolate wrapper on the desk and the question about responsibility that neither of them could answer. By December 1941, when Japan attacks Pearl Harbor and the Pacific War begins in earnest, the hundreds have been forgotten by everyone except the maintenance crew assigned to keep them from deteriorating. Takeshi is flying patrol missions in Yokosuka, piloting aircraft that are good enough, if not perfect, serving the empire because service is duty and duty is everything. The questions Germany planted in him remain unanswered, buried beneath the immediate demands of survival and mission completion. He does not think about American chocolate, does not wonder what happened to Gunter or Heinkel or the workers who assembled fuselages while their foreman let them struggle and learn. The war consumes everything. Questions are luxury, doubt is weakness. There is only duty and death and the narrowing space between them. The war ends in August 1945 with fire from the sky and surrender that feels like the world ending. Takeshi survives, which seems almost accidental, a statistical anomaly in a conflict that consumed millions. He returns to Osaka to find his childhood home destroyed by firebombing, his father dead, his mother living in his sister's overcrowded apartment. Akiko is alive, thinner than he remembers, eyes carrying things she will never discuss. They have no children. The war took that possibility along with everything else. The American occupation begins with uncertainty and fear. Enemy soldiers in the streets, foreign administration, everything Japanese subordinated to American authority. Takeshi expects arrogance, expects the cruelty of victors toward defeated, expects to hate them with the same intensity he once hated the idea of them. What arrives instead is pragmatism bordering on indifference. The Americans are not interested in vengeance. They are interested in rebuilding, in creating stability, in moving forward because dwelling on the past serves no purpose that they can identify. It is not mercy exactly. It is something more American. The practical understanding that you cannot build the future while nursing grudges from the past. Takeshi finds work in 1947 with the Allied Occupation Administration translating technical documents, helping American engineers understand Japanese industrial capacity. It is humble work for a former commander, but pride is another luxury the defeated cannot afford. He takes the position and tells himself that engineering transcends politics, that technical knowledge has no nationality, that he is simply doing what he knows how to do. The transfer notice arrives in April 1948, 3 months temporary assignment, Fort Worth, Texas, Consolidated Volti Aircraft Corporation, technical liaison on B-36 bomber development, housing provided. Transportation arranged. Report May 1st. Takeshi reads the notice 3 times, certain there is some mistake. Why Texas? Why him? Why a bomber project? But the orders are clear and arguing with occupation. Administration is pointless. So he packs a single bag, kisses Akiko goodbye and boards a military transport flight that will carry him across the Pacific to a country he spent years training to fight and 4 years actually fighting and has never once considered visiting. America appears through clouds as something impossible. Too big, too sprawling, too chaotic. The flight into Fort Worth descends over landscape that seems to extend forever flat and brown and utterly unlike Japan's compressed green mountains. Everything is oversized. The buildings, the automobiles, the roads, even the sky feels larger somehow, as if America ordered extra space and the universe complied. The Consolidated Volti facility is enormous airplane factories stretching across acres of Texas flatland. Takeshi is processed through security by a sergeant who barely looks at his papers, assigned a room in a dormitory that smells of fresh paint and air conditioning, given a badge that identifies him as technical liaison and grants access to areas he is certain he should not be allowed to enter. That first evening, uncertain what else to do, he follows other engineers to the canteen for dinner. The room is loud, crowded, filled with men in various uniforms and work clothes, all of them talking, simultaneously eating with enthusiasm bordering on aggression. Takeshi gets a tray, moves through a line where servers pile food with generous indifference, and finds himself staring at portions that could feed his family for a week in Osaka. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans swimming in butter, cornbread, coffee, iced tea, portions that seem designed for men twice his size. He carries the tray to an empty table and sits alone, overwhelmed by abundance after years of scarcity. The chicken is still hot, the breading crispy, in a way that makes his mouth water involuntarily. He has not eaten fried food since before the war, has not seen meat portions this large since his academy days. For a moment, he simply looks at it, this ordinary American meal that represents everything Japan lacks in 1948: plenty, waste, casual excess. Then he takes a bite and something breaks. The flavor is not subtle, not refined, not carefully balanced like Japanese cuisine demands. This is straightforward pleasure without apology. Crispy skin, tender meat, salt and fat, and the simple satisfaction of eating until full. Takeshi has spent years eating rice and vegetables, rationed portions, carefully measured hunger as constant companion. And now this overwhelming American generosity offered without ceremony to an enemy who helped kill their friends and colleagues. He is not prepared for the tears. They arrive without warning, running down his face while he sits alone at a Texas canteen table crying over fried chicken, unable to explain even to himself what is happening. It is not gratitude exactly, not relief. It is something larger. The sudden recognition that the people who defeated him are feeding him. That mercy exists. That enemies can become something else if someone is willing to let them. A voice breaks through. "You okay, buddy?" Takeshi looks up. The man standing beside the table is perhaps 35, wearing work clothes, oil stains on his sleeves, carrying his own dinner tray. He has kind eyes and a Texas drawl that makes his words softer than their content. "I am fine," Takeshi manages. "The food is very good." The man sits down without asking permission, extends his hand. "Robert Mitchell, structural engineer. You must be the new liaison from Japan. Heard you were coming." Takeshi shakes the offered hand, trying to compose himself, aware that he is still crying and that Mitchell is pretending not to notice. "Takeshi Yamamoto, I apologize. It has been a long journey." Mitchell attacks his dinner with cheerful efficiency, talking between bites, filling the silence, with easy conversation that demands nothing but makes space for everything. He talks about the B-36 project, about the challenges of building an aircraft large enough to carry atomic weapons across intercontinental distances, about the engineering problems that keep him awake at night. He talks about his wife Martha and their 3 kids, about the Texas heat that is just beginning to arrive, about the baseball season and his beloved Fort Worth Cats. And slowly, gradually, without ever directly addressing the tears or the obvious emotional overwhelm, Mitchell creates a space where Takeshi can finish his dinner and recover his composure and begin to understand that he is not being judged for his weakness. When the meal is done, Mitchell stands, picking up both trays. "Welcome to Texas, Yamamoto. Tomorrow is Saturday. You got plans?" Takeshi shakes his head. "I do not know anyone here." "Good," Mitchell grins. "Martha is making pot roast. You are coming to dinner." 1800 hours. I will pick you up out front. Do not argue. She already set an extra place when I told her you were arriving today. The next evening, Takeshi sits in Robert Mitchell's living room in a modest house on a tree-lined street in Fort Worth, drinking coffee that Mitchell's wife Martha has made too strong and too sweet, exactly like Germans drink it, but somehow completely different. The house is small, comfortable, filled with the noise of 3 children under 10 who treat him with curious friendliness rather than fear or hostility. Martha serves pot roast with carrots and potatoes, apologizing that it is simple food, nothing fancy, and Takeshi eats until he cannot eat more, overwhelmed again by generosity he has done nothing to earn. After dinner, while Martha puts the children to bed, Robert takes Takeshi to the garage. There, covered with a tarp, is a partially restored P-51 Mustang. Mitchell pulls the cover back with obvious pride, running his hand along the wing with the reverence that Takeshi recognizes. The love of engineers for the things they understand. "Found her in a scrapyard in Oklahoma," Mitchell explains. "Took me 3 years to get this far. Probably take 3 more to finish. But she is going to fly again. Count on it." Takeshi moves closer, studying the wing, and something clicks in his memory. The profile, the laminar flow design. The way the maximum thickness is shifted after reducing drag at high speed. He has seen this before, not in an American aircraft. In Germany, in the HE-100 blueprints that Siegfried Gunter spread across tables while explaining design philosophy. "This wing," Takeshi says slowly, "this is not traditional American design." Mitchell looks surprised, then impressed. "You have a good eye. NACA laminar flow airfoil, same principle the Germans were using before the war. Took us a while to figure it out, but once we did, it changed everything. The Mustang was good. With this wing, it became great. Fast enough to escort our bombers all the way to Berlin and back. Turned the whole air war around. Takeshi runs his hand along the smooth aluminum feeling, the curve that represents ideas crossing borders, knowledge transcending nationalism, engineering, truths that belong to no country because they belong to physics itself. The Germans built this wing first. The Americans built it better. The Japanese bought it and never used it. And now here he stands in a Texas garage touching the same solution to the same problem implemented by different nations for the same purpose. I saw this design in 1938, Takeshi says quietly. In Germany, the Heinkel He 100, same principle, same goal. We purchased 3 aircraft. They never flew in combat. Mitchell stops what he is doing and looks at Takeshi with new interest. You were at Heinkel before the war. Takeshi nods. I was the technical evaluation officer. I flew the prototype. It was the fastest fighter I ever piloted. Well, I will be damned. Mitchell sits on his workbench studying Takeshi like he is seeing him for the first time. So you knew about laminar flow wings before we did? Before the Mustang. We knew Takeshi agrees, but knowing and using are different things. We could not produce the engine, could not replicate the cooling system. The aircraft sat in a hangar until the war ended. Perfect engineering. Useless in practice. Mitchell is quiet for a long moment, then shakes his head with something like wonder. That is the whole war right there, is it not it? Germans had the best engineering. Japanese had incredible dedication. But we had enough. Enough planes, enough pilots, enough industrial capacity to replace losses. Perfect does not win wars. Good enough in sufficient quantity wins wars. It is the same thing Siegfried Gunter said about American pragmatism in that November 1938 office, the same observation about numbers versus quality, but hearing it from an American engineer in a Texas garage makes it real in a way that German pessimism never did. America won not by being better, but by being relentless, by building 100 adequate aircraft while Germany perfected 10 superior ones, by choosing good enough over perfect because good enough delivered today beats perfect delivered never. Takeshi thinks about the He hundreds sitting unused while Zeros fought and died, about German honesty and Japanese pride and American chocolate that became a symbol of something he still does not fully understand, about engineering excellence that served no purpose because it arrived at the wrong moment in the wrong form for the wrong war. You know what the funny thing is, Mitchell continues. After the war, we got access to German research, their wind tunnel data, their design calculations. And you know what we found? They were ahead of us on almost everything. Jet engines, rockets, aerodynamics. If they had another year, maybe 2, they might have had weapons we could not counter. But they ran out of time, ran out of resources, ran out of pilots. All that superior engineering did not matter because wars are not won by engineers alone. The words sit between them, truth spoken without malice, and Takeshi feels something shifting again. The same feeling he had in Germany. The recognition that the world is more complex than any single perspective can contain. That excellence is not enough. That timing matters. That context determines whether brilliance becomes victory or simply becomes memory. Martha calls them in for coffee and pie. Apple pie, which Takeshi has never tasted sweet and warm, and American in a way that transcends mere flavor. They sit around the kitchen table and Mitchell talks about growing up in Texas, about learning to fly in crop dusters, about the day Pearl Harbor was attacked, and how it felt to know that everything was about to change. And then Martha asks the question that has been waiting all evening. What was it like being on the other side? Did you hate us? Takeshi considers his answer carefully. The children are in bed, only adults here, only truth required. I was taught to believe that America represented everything wrong with the modern world. Materialism, lack of discipline, cultural emptiness. I believed this because I was told to believe it. But I never met an American, never tasted American food, never spoke to American engineers. I hated an idea, not people. And now Robert asks, now I eat fried chicken in your canteen and cry because I am alive to eat it. Now I sit in your home and your wife serves me pie and your children do not fear me. Now I see that the people I was taught to hate are simply people. Generous, practical, willing to let the past be past. This is not what I expected. This is better and worse than what I expected. Martha reaches across the table and pats his hand, the gesture carrying more kindness than Takeshi knows how to receive. War is over, honey. You are here. You are welcome. That is all that matters now. But it is not all that matters. That night alone in his dormitory room, Takeshi understands what Germany tried to teach him and what Texas is teaching him again. That honesty transcends nationality. That generosity is a choice, not a characteristic of any particular culture. That the Germans showed him truth because Gunther and Heinkel were tired of lies, and the Americans are showing him mercy because Robert and Martha Mitchell believe in moving forward. These are not German values or American values or Japanese values. These are human values implemented differently by different cultures, but rooted in the same soil. The recognition that we are all engineers trying to build something better, all humans trying to survive and create and find meaning in the chaos. The 3 months in Texas extend to 6, then 9. Takeshi's technical expertise proves valuable. His perspective as someone who fought against American bombers provides insight into defensive thinking. But more than this, he finds himself welcomed into a community of engineers who care more about solving problems than nursing grievances. Mitchell introduces him to other colleagues. Invitations to dinners multiply. Someone starts a weekly poker game and insists Takeshi join. He loses money he cannot afford to lose and laughs about it because the losing matters less than the belonging. He learns to drink coffee, American-style black and strong, the same bitterness he first tasted in Berlin, but somehow transformed by context into comfort. He learns to appreciate baseball, the slow rhythm of it, the way it fills summer evenings with something other than memory. He learns that Texas in summer is hotter than anything he experienced in the Pacific, and he learns to complain about it the way Texans do, with pride disguised as suffering. And slowly, without marking the exact moment of transition, Takeshi stops being a defeated enemy, being tolerated, and becomes simply an engineer among engineers. A colleague, a friend, someone whose past matters less than his present contribution. In November 1948, a letter arrives from Akiko. She is well, his mother is well. Osaka is rebuilding. Life continues. And then in careful characters, she writes something that stops his breath. I am pregnant. The child will arrive in spring. Please come home. Takeshi sits with the letter in his hands, torn between joy and grief and something larger than either. He is going to be a father. At 40, after years of thinking that possibility lost to war and circumstance, the news should be pure happiness. But all he can think is that his child will grow up in defeated Japan, raised by a father who learned too late that enemies are simply people who have not yet become friends. He shows the letter to Robert Mitchell, who immediately organizes a celebration at the house. Martha bakes a cake. The neighbors come over. Someone produces whiskey and toasts are offered to fatherhood and new beginnings and the future that will be better than the past, because it has to be. Takeshi drinks too much and feels too much and eventually finds himself in Mitchell's garage again, standing before the half-restored Mustang, crying for the 3rd time since arriving in Texas. Robert finds him there and does not ask questions, just stands beside him, 2 engineers in comfortable silence until Takeshi can speak. I do not know how to go home, Takeshi admits. I do not know how to be Japanese again after learning to be American. Mitchell considers this, then shakes his head. You were never not Japanese, Yamamoto, and you are not American now. You are just a guy who learned that people are people. That is not nationality. That is wisdom. Take it home, teach it to your kid. That is how the world gets better. One person at a time, choosing to see clear instead of seeing what they are told to see. Takeshi returns to Japan in December 1948. Akiko meets him at the dock, visibly pregnant, and the embrace they share contains everything that words cannot, the months apart. The changes neither can fully explain, the future arriving whether they are ready or not. His son is born in April 1949. They name him Hiroshi. Peace, the character chosen deliberately, hopefully against all evidence that peace is possible or sustainable. Takeshi holds his son and makes promises he knows he cannot keep. That the world will be better, that old hatreds will fade, that engineering and honesty and human kindness will triumph over tribalism and fear. He knows these are lies, knows that the world does not improve simply because individuals wish it would. But he makes the promises anyway, because what else can a father do? The years pass. Takeshi works for Mitsubishi, helping rebuild Japanese aviation industry under American oversight. The irony is not lost on him, building the future under the supervision of former enemies who have become something else. Not quite friends, not quite allies, but not enemies anymore either. He corresponds occasionally with Robert Mitchell. Brief letters about engineering challenges, family updates, the slow restoration of the Mustang. Mitchell sends Christmas cards showing his children growing up. Takeshi sends photographs of Hiroshi. The friendship continues across the Pacific, maintained through paper and stamps, and the understanding that some connections transcend geography. In 1960, Mitchell writes that the Mustang restoration is finally complete. The aircraft flew again, handled beautifully. He is donating it to the Confederate Air Force Museum, where it will be maintained and occasionally flown at air shows. If Takeshi ever comes to Texas again, he should visit, should see what 12 years of weekend work produced. Takeshi never makes that trip. Life intervenes, work demands. The raising of a son, the care of aging parents, the 1,000 obligations that fill decades until you look up and realize that someday has become never. Robert Mitchell dies in 1978. Heart attack. Sudden. The letter from Martha arrives months later apologizing for the delay, explaining that she had to find Takeshi's address, that Robert had kept all the letters in a box labeled friends. She thought Takeshi would want to know, thought he would want to understand that Robert spoke of him often, that the Japanese engineer who cried over fried chicken had taught him something about grace and second chances. Takeshi weeps for his friend, for the dinners and the garage conversations, and the coffee that was always too strong and too sweet, for the man who chose to see a person instead of an enemy, for the Texas hospitality that transformed understanding. And then in 1985, the invitation arrives. Confederate Air Force Reunion and Air Show, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. July, special tribute to Robert Mitchell and other aviation pioneers who preserved wartime aircraft for future generations. The restored Mustang will fly. Martha will be there. She would be honored if Takeshi would attend. He is 76 years old. Hiroshi is 36, an engineer himself working for Sony. Akiko has been dead 2 years, cancer taking her quickly and almost mercifully. Takeshi has no obligations, no responsibilities, no reason not to go, except that traveling to America at his age seems absurd. But something pulls him. Some need to close the circle, to see the Mustang fly, to honor the friend who taught him that defeated enemies can become simply friends if someone is willing to make the first gesture. The flight to Wisconsin is long. Takeshi's body reminds him of every one of his 76 years. But when he arrives at Oshkosh and sees the aircraft stretched across the grass, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all maintained by people who believe that history matters and beauty matters, and the work of engineers deserves preservation. Something in his chest loosens, and their unexpected is the He-100 replica. Not one of the original 3 that sat unused in Kasumigara. A reproduction built by enthusiasts from original blueprints painted in Luftwaffe colors, it never actually wore, sitting among American and British and Soviet aircraft, like they are all simply machines instead of instruments of national will. Takeshi stands before it as the day begins, his hand on the wing, and the years collapse. 1938 in Germany, 1948 in Texas, 1985 in Wisconsin. All the same moment, all the same truth. That engineering excellence transcends borders. That honesty is rare and precious. That mercy is a choice. That enemies are simply friends who have not yet met under the right circumstances. Martha Mitchell finds him there, older now, but still carrying Robert's kindness in her eyes. She embraces him without hesitation, and they stand together while the restored Mustang takes off that laminar flow wing, cutting air with the same efficiency the He-100 demonstrated 47 years ago, proof that good ideas belong to physics, not politics. Later, someone asks about his connection to the He-100. Takeshi tells the story: Germany before the war, the purchase that led nowhere, the speed that mattered less than timing. And then, because Martha is beside him, and because Robert deserves the truth, he tells the rest. Texas after the war. Fried chicken that made him cry. Coffee too strong and too sweet. A garage where an American engineer taught him that the past can be acknowledged without being nursed. That moving forward is not forgetting. It is choosing what to carry and what to release. The crowd listens these American veterans and aviation enthusiasts and people who lived through the same war from different sides, and Takeshi sees in their faces the same thing he saw in Robert Mitchell. The willingness to let enemies become something else. Not friends necessarily, but not enemies anymore either. The Mustang lands that beautiful aircraft with its German-inspired wing and American pragmatism, and the laminar flow design that Siegfried Gunther showed him in blueprints that both nations implemented for the same purpose. Takeshi watches it taxi, and he thinks about chocolate sent from New York to Germany and shared with a Japanese officer, about pot roast served to a defeated enemy, about all the small mercies that made peace possible. Someone asks if he has regrets. Takeshi considers the question seriously. I regret the war, he says finally. I regret the deaths. I regret not understanding sooner that enemies are an invention, not a truth. But I do not regret the aircraft. I do not regret the engineering. I do not regret learning even late that honesty and kindness are not weaknesses. That evening as the sun sets over Wisconsin and the air show winds down, Takeshi returns to the He-100 one final time. He thinks about the 3 aircraft that never flew in combat, about German engineers who admitted failure, about American engineers who chose mercy, about a son named Peace, growing up in a world still learning what that word means. The past cannot be changed. The He-100 will always be the fighter that never fought, but maybe that is its real legacy, not speed or innovation or engineering excellence, but the reminder that some things matter more than victory. That truth matters. That honesty matters. That choosing to build bridges instead of nursing grievances matters. Takeshi Yamamoto learned this in a German factory, forgot it in a Japanese war, and remembered it in a Texas garage. It took 47 years and travel across the world and the friendship of a man who chose to see a person instead of an enemy. But he learned it. Finally. Completely. Too late to change history, but not too late to change himself. And in the end, perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is all any of us can do. Learn, change, choose mercy when vengeance is easier, choose honesty when lies are safer, choose to see people instead of enemies. The old man's hand leaves the wing for the last time. The metal has cooled. The day is ending. And Takeshi Yamamoto, 76 years old, walks away from the fastest fighter he ever flew, carrying with him the slowest lesson he ever learned. That speed is nothing. That engineering is everything and nothing. That we are all simply people trying to build something better from the wreckage we inherit. And that sometimes, if we are very lucky, we get the chance to choose what we build next.